Welcome to the Stephen Sayoun podcast. I want to ask you a question. I didn't know that you ruptured your patella tendon.
Yeah. Oh, you didn't know that?
No.
Yeah.
I
Tore
didn't know that.
Yeah. A couple of years back. I can't remember. I think my kids were 3, so that was in like 2019, I think.
Yeah.
2018. Yeah. Like I did that hopping, like low hurdle hops. And
Tell us more. I want to dig into this.
Yeah. So I've always had like chronic tendinitis in my right knee for the most part, doing sports, other things like that. I've had several surgeries, like just on my body, like a left hip. I have a pin in my left hip, and then how many surgeries I have? I guess that was the main one. And then but I got injuries. Like I got a torn right bicep, I got a torn rotator cuff on the left side, some labor. Like they're just things that like they're there. Never really big deal, but they've been. But I've had tendonitis on my right knee for like the longest, and and then I was playing flag football one time, and like I made a cut, and I was like, ooh, like something felt weird, and it was really sore, more so than usual, like tendonitis, and it always felt kind of soft, like in the outside. So if I ever test like the lateral border of the patella tendon, it felt kind of like a little soft. I'm like, oh shoot, I thought I had a partial tear. So I legit just stopped jumping. Like I was like, I'm done. I'm not gonna jump. I was doing powerlifting and everything else. I was like, I'm cool. I don't need that. So I just stopped doing like hard cutting sports. Went on heavy powerlifting, stayed with the kettlebells, and then I was like, oh, you know what? I stopped doing powerlifting at some point because this time commitment and for whatever reason. And I was like, I need to get back to fitness, right? And so I started jogging a little bit more on top of everything else, and started running. And I was like, I probably should start jumping. So I started easing my way back into jumping. With the idea is like, I'm worried something's wrong with my knee. Like I knew something was wrong with my knee. It just felt weird. And so I eased my way into it, and I was like, okay. So I was doing little hops, like following a lot of like aerobic plyometrics style stuff at first, like Joel Jamieson style, like plyos at first. So I started there, and I was doing all right, and I was jogging, but I wasn't doing a lot of hard cutting, and still lifting and things like that. And then I was doing well, progressing pretty well, increasing heights, increasing landings, felt pretty good. And then the holidays came around, so it was like 3 months of like low activity in regards to what my normal fitness would be, because it's like I'm traveling with the kids, we're going places, holiday, like so it was pretty busy. And then we get back, so January rolls around, and we get back and I start training again, doing a little bit, and then start hopping again. But then I had like a meeting with somebody, and we're working out together as part of the meeting, and probably stress levels a little high, so we're doing little hurdle hops, probably 3-inch hurdles, nothing big. I'd say 3-4 inch, right? Little hurdles like wickets, whatever you want to call them. Just hopping over there, and I remember jumping, and I'm like, man, I'm really heavy on my right side. Like I could feel like a lot of pushing. And I was like, I should be all right. And then like on one of the hops, boom! So like someone kicked me on my knee, and I went down. And I'm just like, damn. And I just knew it because like I was fearful of that happening, beforehand. And I went down, looked down, my kneecap's like sitting halfway up my leg. Not all halfway up, but like sitting way higher than I can. I can't straighten my leg out. I'm like, shit. Didn't hurt. Shit. Like it was like someone kicked you, no pain. And I was like, damn it. Yeah. And I was like, no, when something's torn, it's torn. Like you don't really have pain when tears. It's partial tears that hurt. And then the swelling afterwards, then it starts because you get the pressure, right? Because once the tear is gone, like there's no pressure on it for the most part. And so I was like, nah. So I did that. And then I went to the doc that day. And it's like the urgent care because it's still early in the day. It was like late afternoon. And I was like, hey, I tore my patella tendon. I know it. This, and that. And he was like, oh, you seem to know what you're talking about. And I was like, yeah, I'm an athletic trainer. And I know it's torn, so I don't need to do an MRI or anything like that. Like, can we just go in there and fix it? Because it's torn. And I'm like, if there's anything wrong else in that knee that you see, you're in there already. Just take a look while you're in there. And so we had surgery that next day. So it was like it was quick. It was nice having be able to get in and out. I had that, and the rehab back has been. It was all right. Like I've had ups and downs. Like it's slow. Like it just feels. It was slow at first because you had to like let it heal a little bit. Like they wire it down, and my knees it was a lot stiffer. But you can see like the sutures in the knee on a good day. So you can see like the zigzag where they close the capsule up actually in my knee. So it's like, the knee isn't normal. It doesn't have as much like spring to it as it normally would because of that. And like if they put it in, who knows like the tracking aspect of it. So it's a little off. But honestly, like My other knee gives me more of a problem, and I've had arthritis in my left knee since I was like early 30s, like late 20s, and I've always had
Man,
left knee issues. Yeah, so like that's before I knew anything I knew. Just basic, hardcore rehab, like it's like stronger is better all the time. That's all I knew, and that's like now I have arthritis in my left knee, and I had that since that was because I had a pin in my hip when I was in 8th grade, and then I sprained my knee 5-6 years in a row. Like every year I was spraining that left knee.
Sorry, man, I've got so many questions to go off that. But so you got the pin on the same side as the knee the patella tendon that you ruptured.
No, the pin's on the other side. So I tore my right patellar tendon.
Yep.
And I have arthritis, and the pin's in my left knee, and the arthritis is in my left, and my pin's in my left hip, and the arthritis is in my left knee.
So why did you have to get a pin in your left hip? What happened?
Honestly, it's called slip femoris capitis or whatever. I think there's another name for it, but it's like a legs parvis. No. It's a slip femoris head. So my femoral head, so where your growth plate is, it was slipping away, and it was common in overweight African American children, and in America, is what they say. But it's so I had that in 8th grade, and I remember it felt like a muscle strain, but that wouldn't get better. And so they're like, you have to pin it because it's literally slipping out of place, right? So you got to hold it in place. And so I had that done in 8th grade, and ever since then, it's like rehab was probably shit. I mean, I was in 8th grade. I don't really remember, right? But like legit every year after that, I sprained my knee. Like every single year I sprained my knee for like 5 years in a row. Yeah.
On that the same side, the right knee. Is that what you're talking about?
No, the left knee. I sprained my left knee ever since. That's why I was arthritic, I think, because I just kept injuring it. I had like joint mice, I had like osteochondral defects in there. It was bone on bone for the most part, and the trochlea. I'm probably gonna have to get a replacement at some point. But right now it doesn't hurt too much. Like, I mean, it grinds. Like you can hear my knee. Like we're doing like a wall sit. It's loud. Yeah. It's like pops. Like you're like, that sounds terrible. It doesn't hurt when it does that, but I know I'm gonna be sore later on, and it swells up a little bit when it does that. But it's not painful yet. So I'm riding that out as much as possible, trying to get some length from this side.
Yeah, and this is why the knees over toes guy doesn't work for everybody. You
Correct.
Get someone like get someone like yourself jamming that knee into deep ranges of flexion. It's just going to piss things off, and you'll be having a knee replacement sooner than later.
Sure. Right? Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's just like part of these injuries, lead me down my path in regards to like the one size fits all thing. Right? It's like I had all these injuries, and it's like, how can we? The things I've been doing work somewhat, but it's not. It doesn't work. Like it hurts, right? We're doing all these things like people do. I'm like, well, I'm arthritic. Like I can't. Like it's not smart for me to do these things, right? It's going to grind me down because like there's literally bone on bone. So I got to find a different way, or find a better way, right? Rather than just get strong. And so part of that's led me down my education because selfish reasons in regards to making sure I can move better, as well as helping other people, right?
I think that's a great point because I feel like most S&C coaches or just coaches in general who were athletic in the past and had to overcome a serious injury wanted to look for better solutions and answers, and they went down this whole learning curve of like biomechanics, why me, tracing back your steps, and then that's probably kind of where it pushed you into Bill's work, I'm guessing.
Yeah, very much. Yeah, because I started with PRI. Because this later. The knee issue was I've been through like FMS, SFMA.
I've done all that shit.
Kinesio tape, like all the different assessment stuff. I'm into kettlebells. Like I've been through like all these different systems, and it's like okay. And I got a PRI, and the PRI was neat because I came from an osteopathic background, so a lot of muscle energy techniques and like fascial stuff and things like that. And I looked at PRI because they're one of their lead instructors is local to the town I live in now, and I started finding into them. And I was like, oh, cool! It's a way to do some muscle energy techniques without me. So it's like homework for muscle energy techniques. Is how I first got into it, and I realized it was deeper. It went a lot deeper than that after I got into it. But like that, it made me understand things and actually helped my knee out. I had the chronic the crunching, and it helped me feel better with the knee, like the left knee movement, so it wasn't as crunchy. And then also help with the more so that was the main focus. I went to the practitioner to see how it works. I was like, let me test it on myself first. So I went to the clinic, and the things they did work pretty well. So I was like, okay, let me learn some of this. And so I went there, but then at the same time, this goes in the whole idea of like trying to get a better way. Is like I have patients who, they had surgeries and things changed, and like they're not presenting as they would the algorithm, right? They don't fit the algorithm, they don't fit the patterns. Um, and then I started having, then I had children, and they were just different. And I'm like, all right, so these things are, I'm like, so like this one size fits all doesn't make sense to me, or doesn't work for
Mm,
me. I need a little bit more of a, I get 80-20, but I want to know what I can with those 20, right? It's like, sure, a lot of things are very similar, but the 20% difference can make a big deal. In regards to the pattern, the path I want to do with treatment people. So then that's what really kind of led me down into build stuff, because I'd asked someone about the different shapes and positions, and like I think it was that Human Matrix with Zach Couples, one of his like first years I think teaching it, and or second years teaching, I can't remember. But I had asked about it, and he had a slide already prepared that was like, yeah, we generally see these different shapes. I was like, okay, so that does make sense because it's something I've been seeing, especially with my own children. On top of that, and so that led down to even more so, and then I found the Bills work after that.
that's awesome. I just want to go back to your patella tendon for a little bit. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
When you first started experiencing, so like I listen to a lot of Jake's work as well, and some of the stuff that he puts out, sometimes tendonitis is not always linked to, or you're not always prone to a rupture if you're experiencing tendonitis. But
Right.
one thing that stuck out to me when you said your leg felt heavy, like it you just felt heavy and you couldn't get any push off that leg. I ruptured my Achilles tendon
Mm-hmm.
on the right leg during wrestling practice,
Yeah, I didn't know
and
that till he posted there recently, and I was like, oh shit, he just his did Achilles. Yeah.
yeah. I did it 5 years ago, and the exact same sensation that you just explained with your knee was
Mm-hmm.
exactly how I felt jumping the
Yeah.
day before I ruptured it.
It's crazy, right? Like it just.
It was like I was like, man, my foot feels like a dead weight, and
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't get proper I couldn't get proper knee
Mm-hmm.
extension, just terminal knee extension, and I couldn't get proper plantar flexion where I could feel the calf actually working, and
Mm-hmm.
that happened 2 months prior to the rupture.
Oh wow.
So I was getting dry needling around the popliteus to
Ah.
help with knee extension, and
Right.
getting the calf dry needled as well to help with getting proper knee extension and plantar flexion through the foot. But I just felt inhibition around that whole right side, and
Mm-hmm.
I was a left footed jumper as a kid, long
Okay.
jump, high jump, basketball. I was a 1 foot takeoff kind of guy where it was all left foot takeoffs. Um, but that one thing, man, I know there's got to be people out there that have experienced this as well.
Definitely.
It's like the foot just didn't want to move. It
Mm-hmm. And
was
it,
like it was tired.
yeah, it's same like I said, the knee felt the same way. It's like I'm like, man, I'm really favoring this right side, but I also can't get off of the right side. Like I couldn't push myself out of that side. Every time I landed, it felt
Yeah,
like I was like just landing on that leg. It was like everything was just heavy.
yeah,
And then the one
yeah,
time I went to it just, said, nope, I'm done. And
yeah.
it's just like, but yeah, there was like, and it was, I remember telling myself I should probably stop. Like it just felt like I'm like I should probably stop,
Yes.
but I was like, I'm good, And
Yeah.
it didn't hurt. I just like, man, this feels. I'm like, and then literally
Feel
like,
weak.
yeah,
Yeah.
like the next set, it was like done, and it just popped
Boom.
on me. I'm
Yeah.
like, son of a bitch, and I was like, I knew I should have stopped,
Yeah.
you know.
But same thing. Like when I snapped mine, I stepped backwards and I felt this burning sensation around the
Mm-hmm.
calcaneus, and I was like, "Is my coach standing behind me, kicking me in the heel?"
Kicking you,
Or
yeah, kicking you.
and I turned around. I go, "Oh, it feels like someone's throwing a barbell at the back of my heel,
Mm.
like in the gym, right?" And I turned around, and then boom, it snapped. And I knew what I did straight away because I had been working with a client who ruptured their Achilles tendon
Mm-hmm.
8 weeks prior, and I was like, man, imagine that happens to me because I've got like weak calves, and then it happened, and then the same thing. I was like, fuck, I snapped my Achilles. I took a knee. I couldn't walk on it. Like my foot was just like disconnected,
Mm-hmm.
and I was touching the back of my Achilles, and it was just mush. There
Yep.
was nothing there. It balled up to the bottom. It went to
Mm-mm.
the bottom, and my coach is like, no, you're fine, you're fine, and I'm like, no, man, feel the back of my tendon. And he's like feeling it. And he goes, oh shit, we'll just get some ice. We'll get some ice. And I was like, surgery, surgery
Yeah,
next day.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Did you have yours right away too?
Yeah, because I ended up having like physios put me on a table like I was an experiment,
Yeah.
and they're all coming in poking at the
Mm-hmm.
tendon, and I'm like, fuck off, it's hurting, and like they're giving
yeah,
that, where they do that
yeah,
squeeze of
yeah,
the
yeah.
calf
Yep, yep.
to see if the foot moves,
Uh
and
huh.
I had about 100, 100 of those going on, and I'm like, it can't be torn, I'll go non-surgical. I started doing all this research about non-surgical routes of success rate, and I ended up going down the surgical route. I'm glad I did, but
Yeah.
then the surgeon said to me, you had loose bone in there. You had the tendon was torn in like a Z,
Ooh. Ooh.
like a,
Yeah. A Z.
and he's like, yeah, like a Z, and he's like, you needed surgery. Now the tendon's really thick
Yes.
compared to the other side. Is yours like that on your
Yeah.
knee?
My knee's like super thick. Like it's not. It doesn't feel nearly as like. It's actually gotten way better. Probably since I've been jumping more.
Yeah.
But like it was. It's like it's so much thicker. Like drastically thicker. But it felt even beforehand like mush, almost like I didn't have like
Yeah.
it was just like on there, it's like, oh, I got something holding my knee to my patella to my lower leg, but now it's like
Yeah.
you can it feels, but it's hard, like it's like not pliable, it's just as thick, and like the outside stiffer than the inside, like it's really interesting, like, but I mean,
Yeah.
like
Right.
this knee gives me less problems than my other knee.
Yeah. Right. So what do you now like? The other knee would be more of a problem because you like got bone on bone, right?
Yeah, I got bone on
So
bone.
so for me, if I was like how I would train this person or someone like you, correct me if I'm wrong, is you can't go into those deep ranges of knee flexion.
It
Like there has to.
depends. Yeah, like I have to
Ha,
make sure I have good form. So this is one of the things I've been looking at is like I can't force range of motion for the sake of range of motion, and I feel like people get hurt with like doing that anyways. Um, so if I have good relative motion, if I'm moving relatively as much as I can, it feels good. Like I can feel it, right? If I can keep my center of mass back, I can also get a lot deep. Like I can maintain those. So, but like when it comes to
yeah.
like the back squats and things like this, I have to be more turned out a little bit, or squats in general. Like if I go all the way deep, I do feel the pressure in my knee. Overall, and then again, like I have a bunch of stuff going on, so I don't know, but it doesn't hurt per se. But I can definitely feel things pinching up in there, and a little bit more discomfort. But if I like I do knee extensions or like wall sits, and I do like a hard. So if I push, so this is what I think about like when it comes to force reduction, right? If I
Yeah.
can push straight down into the ground, I should say, it feels good. If I start pushing like on angles, like forward, if that makes
Mm,
sense, I
more
start to feel it a
horizontal
lot
force.
more. Yeah, like so if I'm like a
Yeah.
wall sit and I like try to push into the wall,
You're
it's
pushing.
like clack,
Yes.
clack, 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 clack. But if I'm going straight down, it feels so much better.
Do
Like
you reckon you're getting a bit of movement, like maybe from the
most
tibia,
likely, I would
like
say
would
that,
be?
and then like it's orientation involved with that, right? So if I'm pushing my body, I'm not pushing down, I'm not creating IR, which is straight down. So it's like I can't push
Mm,
with my hips if I'm doing that nearly as much, and so I'm getting
would
a
be creating
twist.
more ER,
Right,
wouldn't
and
you?
I'm losing uh, probably temporal rotation. So it starts locking up at that point, and it kind of stays in this knee extension position, and it takes it up too quick, and it starts grinding is what it feels like is happening. But as soon as I can keep my center mass back, keep my weight back, and I can like load the heels like I'm supposed to,
Yeah.
it definitely opens up the window. Like I'm not saying I'm out here. I had the arthritis as I was powerlifting, right? So it's like I can still do it. Um, and it was just, but now it's as I'm doing sports stuff, it's like okay, it's much more important for me or I'm working with these athletes. It's like I got to make sure I keep that weight properly. I'm pushing more down, not just driving extension every single stop, because then my knee
Yeah.
does like swell up. Like it does again, not overly painful, but like okay, I did something because it just gets stiff.
So like a reverse sled drag, would that piss it off?
If I go heavy on it, yes. So
Yes,
I don't
it's
go
the
heavy
same
reverse
kind.
sled drags, right? I go light,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, if I go
Yeah.
heavy, it pisses it off.
Right. It's funny because like I was working with an MMA athlete who ruptured his PCL 9 weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
and all hamstring work was out of the equation. Like anything that
It pulls it back every
pushed
single.
was
Yeah.
the opposite. Yeah, it was like the him pushing. Well, it's the same thing. Like he's pushing down into the floor, or even hinging, like getting him to hinge over in a
Mm-hmm.
kickstand hinge. It was like his knee was buckling, and that was a good learning curve for me because it was all quads. It's like
Yep.
quads, quads, quads. We got to get the quads strong, and then we started reintroducing some ISO stuff, which is funny because like it's kind of like what you were saying. If he would push into the wall, I'm just trying to think. It would no, it would be different though. So if you were hinging with your issue, the most likely when you're hinging and you're coming down, that tibia will have to. There'll be more force with a like with a PCL. You don't want the knee to move. It's going to put a lot of stress on the knee moving forward and backwards, right? The
Yeah.
tibia,
So
sorry.
the PCL limits posterior translation of the tibia. So
Yes,
if I'm doing hamstring work, right, so it's going to pull it into that position, and so it's like
yes,
okay, so if you're trying to hinge and you anchor the hamstring, it's going to yank it, pull it. It's like oh shit, so you have to have a really strong co-contraction with the quads almost to
yes,
hold to delay that posterior tibial translation. Where if you have like an ACL or something like that, it's the opposite, right? Your tibia is translating anteriorly, and so you would have the hamstring strong to maintain. And like for me, because of the arthritis, it's like the same thought process. Like it's in this knee extension position, which is the tibia going forward. And so if I can delay that, it feels better because I'm not just grinding up on it. I'm getting
just
some
grinding
space
at you.
between the tibia and the patella.
It's funny though because like with PCLs, they're not so quick to operate on PCLs
No,
here.
nope, not here either.
Why is that? Why is that though, Greg?
Because they look at it as oh, you tore your PCL because people are quad dominant. It heals on its own sometimes. Like they look at it as a heal on its own thing. But because of this, the general how research is, how we are movers, people have a tend to people think it's quad dominant. So people are always worried about having um, dominant quads. And so if you have a PCL tear, your quad's already doing its job of holding it forward. So they think, okay, you don't need it. But I don't necessarily think that's true.
Mm,
Because like now it's like you got to find out the right anchor. Like there's a rotational aspect of the PCL, and I'd have to look. I can't remember which one it is. Like if it rotates in, I think it gets taught. If I go, yeah. So if it rotates, externally rotate, it gets taught when I think internally rotate the tibia. Um,
right.
and so like most people don't have that. And so it's like, or
Yeah.
so it's like we're in these. Yeah, that makes no sense. But like in general, it's like I don't know why they don't do it, but I believe it's because the quad dominance, they don't feel it's as important as the ACL for some reason, like the instability. And it's not super
Mm,
common. Like it's usually in car accidents. Usually it's not an athletic injury. It happens, obviously, but it's not as like it's a rare thing for athletes. So they don't look at it from an athletic standpoint most of the times. Because I had an athlete tearing a PCL on fell on the ground, knee straight into the turf, right?
yes.
Jammed it
That
up,
that's
and
that's what happened with this guy in wrestling.
yep, and we didn't
Yeah.
fix it, and we didn't catch it at first because like dude was tough and strong, everything was stiff. And then Vince like, "What's going on?" We got to look, and he had to have surgery because it bothered him throughout the whole season. So he had to have surgery to get it fixed.
Shit. Did he
So
make a full recovery?
yeah, I mean for the most part, he had a bunch of other stuff going on
Yeah.
in the end.
Yeah. Nice. Um, have you heard about that new bracing protocol for the ACL where you've got to fit the mold though? Like if you rupture
Mm-hmm.
your ACL, but you've got no meniscus damage, no MCL damage, it's just you got lucky
And
and
it's
you
close enough
ruptured.
to each other, and you just lit a heel on its own.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I know a couple of fighters that went through that protocol. It's fucking horrendous though. They brace your knee at like certain degree of knee
Uh
flexion, and then
huh.
every 2 weeks they increase the degree, or I don't know if it's more knee flexion or less knee flexion. I can't remember, but it's just so that ends meet. So if you think you
Yeah.
probably want it 30 degrees maybe at the start, and
And then
then you would,
I would
yeah.
say
I don't
start
know if you go
shorter.
straighter
I would think you would go straighter because that's going to create a
as
little
you,
bit more space in between because
yes.
it's gonna anchor it here a little bit, and then as it heals, you put more tension. How long are they in that brace
Yeah.
for?
Fuck, man. This guy was in the brace for like 12 weeks. Like he couldn't. It was fucked. Like it would have been torturous. Like being because when I was in the boot with my
Yeah.
Achilles, man, it was fucking torture. Like I'd be hopping around on one leg. Like my other leg got really good at jumping, and then I would be working all day in this boot, and I'd be lifting in the boot too, because
Yep.
then I'd have to stand on a plate to so
To
my
even
then
out.
my hip then my hips got
Oh,
all fucked
you
up, and then
you were like doing like
yeah,
squats and
I
stuff.
was bro, I was doing 140 RDLs on
That's
like
wild.
6 weeks after surgery,
Yeah.
yeah, because I was going crazy, and I couldn't get any knee flexion on that
Mm-hmm.
rupture, so my hips were all fucked up, and I was like, I would have had
Wow.
a lot of low back pain going on, but yeah, I really look back at it now, and I was like, I would never do that again. The stuff that I know now, with the way that my hips are, and
Uh-huh.
I just never would go down that same rehab process. But man, that's what I mean. Like there were no answers out there.
Mm-hmm.
I had to explore and make mistakes, and I'm guessing you probably had to do some of that yourself as well, and that's why you stumbled across some of Bill's work
100%. Yeah. It's
or
like, I mean, that,
PRI.
yeah, in general, yeah. It's like PR out to build everything else. Like, it's always trying to find a better way. That's what you're always searching for is like, how can I make things better? And even things work. I have a problem. Like, if it works, it's like, okay, I know this works. I want to do something different. I'm going to try to find a better way. Versus, like,
Yeah,
sometimes, like, do what works, tried and true. And
that's
so, like, for me, it's always trying to push the envelope, right? Get things better. And when things don't work, it's like you almost have to find a different solution. Um, and that takes some exploration every now and then. But yeah, that definitely
yeah,
led me into the to Bill's work, Zach's work, and then everybody else now that because Bill's work is nice, primarily because it's a principle based program, right? It's not saying do this, do that. It's like, hey, this is how we move, this is how we do things. And so
mm,
when I take other systems, all other systems fit into it because I just got to know
yeah,
how to use that system within the framework of the principles, right? It's this understanding of what the system is trying to achieve and then why
hmm,
it would be useful and when it wouldn't be useful. And
yeah,
and and, and,
definitely.
and Bill's work I
I
think really
think
helps with
you
that.
I think you do a great job of it. Like I look at your social media and stuff, especially with that split squat that you put up,
Yeah.
where you naturally you'd think, okay, I'm rotating into that stance leg,
Mm-hmm.
I'm I'm gonna create more internal rotation. But what's happening? The way that you explained it was fantastic. Where you're just jamming shit up and you're running out of room and you're not giving yourself a chance to move through internal rotation
Right, because you're not.
while you're doing this.
Yeah, if you're doing a split squat, you're not really turning per se, right? It's like your goal is to get over that leg, right? So you're turning to square up because you start in a split position. So I need space. So I need my acetabulums to face away from each other. And so as I
Yes.
squat down, I'm not trying to face the other way. I'm trying to face forward. And so my acetabulums now need to be faced like squared up. If I turn, I'm no longer doing that. I'm just driving this when I'm in a femur shape or a hip shape that doesn't really make space for that. Right? It's like as I approach that 90-degree back leg straight, right leg back front leg straight, like 9 degrees from each other. That's a very squared up position. That's very
Mm,
hard stop power position, if you will. And so I'm not trying to move from that position. I'm not trying to turn. I'm trying to be square. I'm trying to be stable when I'm there.
yeah.
And so if
Yeah.
I turn into it, I'm just going to fall out the side and orient.
Yeah. So you're starting from like if you're starting from early stance, the acetabulum has to kind of be facing. You have to be in ER, right? Because
Yeah,
you're on your
it's facing away
heel.
from you. The thing about
You're
if you're
facing
taking a
away.
step, yeah, my right foot's in front. I
Yeah.
can't. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not turning that side. Yeah,
Yeah. I know.
I'm
Yeah.
ER.
I
My
know.
right foot's in front of me, and then I bring my body
Yeah.
over top of me, and as soon as my
Yes.
other foot comes in front, I start coming off of that side. Right?
Because I've been guilty of this, Greg. Like I
Ditto.
get what you're saying. I've fucked up now because like I think I kind of overcorrected when I started learning David's work with the kickstand hinging,
Mm-hmm.
where you kind of want that femur to be in IR slightly. You want that pronated foot, and then but the difference is you're talking about hinging and knee flexion. They're two different movements, right? So
Right.
you're not going to be over the stance leg so much in a split squat as opposed to a hinge. Like you're not
Right. And
like what
single
I'm.
leg
Yeah,
activity. You got to be
yeah,
over that. I mean, single
yeah.
leg. You're going to be way more over that leg, like legit on
Because
top of that leg. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So I guess it could make sense from that point of view, where you can create a little bit of rotation at the start. But if your swing leg or your back leg is so far behind, it's going to pull your pelvis away from the
Yes.
stance leg.
That's why he
So
keeps it pretty close.
yeah, yeah, that's right. And I found that you get a better
Mm-hmm.
stretch on the glute when you do shorten that stance,
Yes.
a lot more. But that's interesting. Like now, I had a. I don't want to cause too much of a ruckus, but I want to ask you this question. I'm not trying to reference it to anybody, but does the orientational position of your joints have an effect on the length tension relationship between muscle?
Does joint orientation affect length interrelationships to the muscle?
Yeah,
Yeah, 100%.
that's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
How,
you.
how,
That's
how else? Like, how would that not? Like, it has to.
exactly. It has to. Yes, because I put up a post yesterday about this. Like the position of your pelvis can have an effect on how tight your hip flexors are. Right.
100%.
So you can't deny that. So why would we use an anterior loaded squat to create a better stack to get more hip flexion in ER? So that was my argument with a post that I put up the other day. Was like if you're, let's say, someone who's heavily center of mass is shifted forward,
Yeah.
they have, let's say, a nutated pelvis, more of a nutated position of the pelvis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're probably going to run out of hip flexion and ER sooner than someone who has more of a counter nutated position.
Yeah. 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 Most likely.
Like you, that's what I'm saying. That was my argument where someone brought up the whole lower cross syndrome. Someone brought up some study of a lower cross syndrome
And so
thing. It was just
yeah, no. I mean, your joint position is going to, it sets like you got to like if my hips are anterior oriented and I have, my hamstrings are gonna be in a lengthened position, my hip flexors are gonna be in a short position because like they are like it just there is only so much space. So if I tip it forward, they're closer together. Now,
exactly.
can I undo that? Is one thing, but as they're there, they're there. And now if I load that up and I stay strong there, I'm not going to want to move out of that position, right? And so
Yeah,
it's like now your goal is to you're going to have you're going to run out of space because you're tipped forward, you're anchored. Like you go to drop unless you can posterior tilt, get the hamstrings, pull things down. Not posterior tilt. This get out of that anterior orientation. I'm going to run out of space, and I'm going to have to do something to get out of that space, which is going to be a butt wink, which is going
yeah,
to be a wide in my base. Maybe turn my knees in, hinge back versus squatting down, right? It's going to be something to create enough space for that movement. And
mm,
if depending on what your goals are, like usually a lot of times that's not what you want. I say
exactly.
majority of the time that's not what you want. Like there's
Yeah,
probably some weird person out there who wants to do it. So I'm not going to say 100% of the time, but generally, so you want to you want to give them a load or something that may help them achieve a better position at the start, so then they can have better range of motion through.
yeah, definitely. That makes sense. Thank you for answering that and clearing
Yes.
that up.
Yes.
So now with you, Greg, you work predominantly. I think you're saying you work more with like younger youth athletes. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's about most of my clients probably are most people I work with are high school and younger, and then I have college level, and then I have general population as well. But most of them are high school and younger at this time.
Right. Just going back, I really enjoyed your episode with Jake, and you guys were talking about where you put up that Instagram post of the mushy knee
Mm-hmm.
and the knee that looks like this fucking knee can jump.
Yeah.
And this guy, and I want to touch more on that because I had Osgood Schlaters growing up, and I still got these bony protrusions on my
Mm-hmm.
neck, on that tibial fucking thing, and just looks pretty ugly, and it hurts to kneel on my knees in combat sports. Um, I want to know if you're currently working with any youth athletes that are dealing with Osgood Schlaters, and what are the common things that you see from an athletic standpoint, or how that could actually be. How does it come about with kids? Is it with active kids or?
Yeah, so usually I see it in active kids. um, who are really tight, usually narrows, honestly. Usually, I say that. I say not usually narrows, funneled up. They're going to be V'd, right? They're going to be pylon or kind of have a small waist relatively. Is usually what I see, or they're pylon-y, like they're straight up and down, not pylon-y, but straight up and down and narrow
Yeah.
and tight hips. So they all have tight hips, every single one of them. That I see. And so I'm dealing with like 3 right now, or they're coming in the gym. They have really tight hips. And one was really bad. I didn't see him like he wasn't at the gym at first. He came in and was like, I have, Oscar Slaughters. I'm like, he couldn't bend his knee unweighted. Like it hurt
Ooh.
that much, right? So it was like, all right. So it was like, we got to calm down a little bit of that inflammation first before we really start doing anything on top of, before we start loading, think about trying to load that knee. But they all have these really, like, they have no internal rotation whatsoever.
Fuck, that's mean, man.
Yep, they have no internal rotation whatsoever. And like again, they can't achieve like 90 degrees of hip flexion and squats without rounding their back. They're always on their toes, so they go to stop. All stopping is done with like the forefoot. Their heels never contact the ground. And again, their hips are just always turned out, like slightly turned out. Their feet may be forward, but you can see like their hips are kind of turned out. They want to run with rotation versus like straight ahead. But usually they're pretty quick. Like I say, they have short ground contact times, I should say. Like usually they have pretty short ground contact times, to be honest. And so my goal is to keep them like, and the long short of that is like their center of mass is usually extremely forward. And they can't cut their quads off. They can't cut their knees off. They have no hamstring strength. And they have like really no glute strength in all honesty. And so it's like the overall goal for me is like, okay, we need to get you more flexible as however we want to do it in a certain way, but like we're trying to get their center mass back. Like again, I don't talk to them like this, understandably. Like hey,
Of course,
you're right. But we're trying to get their center mass back. I'm trying to be able to put whole foot pressure, like say put force down versus always forward and back because they never push down. It's always forward and back. If they do push down, it's like you can see it in their back, they're arching down or something like that because they can't get force straight down because of their position. And so, like, we do things on the back, on the ground, on the wall, just teaching them to press into the wall. We start to work on, like, loosening their hips, mobility work, turning their knee, and tibial internal rotation because they lack all these things. But again, usually their hips are going to be the main focus when it comes, like, attacking me, like me attacking it, really going after it, and then pressing through the foot, keeping weight back. And that's what we usually do a lot of times. I work ISO with that, but the weight has to be back through their heel, right? I want them pushing straight down through their heel, whole foot versus through the ball of their foot. And then because we're trying to get things really untwisted, take some pressure off of that bone. Because essentially all it is I've taken the knee and it usually starts at the hip and I've pushed everything forward and from the hips. And so then everything starts to turn out, right? So we think like bow-legged people.
Yes.
And then everything starts to turn out and then it turns. And eventually like now I get to the point where it's like I'm not collapsing in. That now the tendons are turning and then it grabs up tibial tuberosity and starts to pull that tibial tuberosity with it. But I need to put force down into the ground where the lower tibia now is trying to turn back into the ground to put force into the ground. And so you have this twisting, but because they're stiff enough at this point in their knees and their hips and their quads, because their quads are always on, the load goes directly to the bone because there is no yield through the tendon. It's all the yielding now is coming through the bone, and then it's that prolonged time frame also then increases that twist, because that bony twist between the upper tibia and lower tibia starts to lead to a lot of this gotcha sludge. So I can get that. You can decrease a lot of pain fairly quickly. Once you can get kind of that elongation, get a better foot position, get a better hip position, where you kind of get that unringing of that lower leg. And then, so you bring the tibia in on the distally, approximately out distally, and then get the quad or the femur to externally rotate with that as well. And you get this nice, you get this externally rotate the femur, proximal distal femur, internally rotate the proximal femur, and then you get this nice straight line. And now, I can do a lot. I can take the pressure off. My tendon can actually yield now, right? So like if you get later and you get stiffer, and then you can start driving the yield through isometrics, like older kids who have like Osgood slot, like late stage Osgood, where they're already getting stiffer, the bone's starting to settle. You can start getting some yield through the tendon with isometrics, just training that, but you never change that position. So they'll always have a propensity to potentially get some inflammation here and there because you never address the biomechanic aspect of things. But you can get some relief with the general iso because now the bone's stiff enough to kind of hang on. And you can you also get the strength enough to, because kids are pretty weak still, they're pretty floppy, right? You actually get the muscle strength to actually get a yield now through the tendon, and that gives them a little bit of a buffer as they get better. But at the same time, I really do feel like at the same point, because now they're training this really high force position, because that's a very high force position we're talking about, that you get it. I think a lot of the kids I see who have battled Osgoods and come out on the other side tend to be pretty athletic. Um, their durabilities, whatever, depending on that's a very dependent on the athlete mentality and what they've done. But kids who have I've seen them tend to be, as long as they battle through it, they have a little bit bigger bump, not drastic. Like, and there's a happy medium. They tend to have a lot more explosiveness, tend to jump higher, tend to be a little bit faster. I have noticed that, but like it's like through the fire. They've had to go, and it
Yeah.
increases the leverage essentially that the tendon has to pull and create force. So like it increases your capacity for that knee to load and produce force.
Right. So would you say that those same individuals, like, they struggle getting into early stance? Like, as in
So we're gonna get a what stance?
early stance, like being able
Yes,
to get
yeah,
more on the
yeah,
heel. Yeah.
yes, yeah. They struggle mightily.
Plantar flexion. Plantar flexion is like
Not,
non-existent to a
I
degree.
mean, yeah, I would say
Stiff.
plantar flexion is potentially on the toes, right? Like
Yeah,
there's no
that's
negative shin
me.
angle or whatever it is, right? It's like
Oh
everything is just
man, that's
forward
me.
and mid
And then
stance, late
and
to
then
late to later, essentially.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Walk
Gotcha.
around on a mat.
Okay. So you need to just get them more into an expansive
Yeah.
position
Mm-hmm.
to get more expansion, so they've got more room to move. Man, I wish I had you as a coach when I was a kid. I
I mean,
wouldn't have
I didn't know any of
after.
this stuff. Yeah. But I mean,
Yeah, I
I say
know.
like half these kids don't want to listen to anything anyways. They're kids, right? Like, oh, I gotta
Yeah,
do
no,
this. It's
that's
like
so.
chill out. Like if I get the parents on board, it works. If the parents aren't fully locked in, I say parents may be locked in, but they don't have the time sometimes. But if you
Yeah,
get a
yeah,
parent who's really involved, like things can work really well because they make them do the stuff they need to do. You know, kids are kids. Like they're
yeah.
gonna be kids, and I try to make it as fun as possible because
That
it
would
shows
be
them.
that would be Yeah, like that would be a big challenge because like you can hardly get them to focus and stay still. So how do you create now I want to ask you is how do you create some of those changes in the younger population when a lot of it is like throwing, jumping, skills. From what I've heard with Charlie Francis work with working with the like younger kids, it's all about like just getting them to move with their body weight, getting them to do a lot of throwing, jumping. How would you kind of like get those changes like what you're doing, which I think is fantastic, which is going to set these athletes up for long term success?
Well, like if they're, it depends on the age. Like for each kid, it depends on their mental age, if that makes sense, right? How locked in they are. If they're in
Yeah,
pain, you got to do things a little bit differently because they can't do what they want to do. And so it's like you got to use that leverage of, hey, we're going to do this. So I try to just get things involved, but it's going to be like very much foreign specific stuff. Like we're not doing respiratory work for the most part. Even though if we could, it'd probably clear things up really quickly. For the kids I can work with, like, oh, we can get the breath work and we can get the position right and increase those chances because they're super malleable at that time, right? If I just block my hand on them and hold, breathe in, it's like I'm going to force things in the right area. And then it's like, feel that, hold it. They can work. But like the thought process is try to get them to do things they're used to, as close to them as I used to. So like I have for a basketball player, like we do a lot of things with the basketball, right? Be it, hey, look, we're gonna go between the legs. So it's like, okay, but you have to have your foot in front of you and you have to have your hip open and then you stay chest up. So we're just gonna go between the legs with the ball, but we got to keep that foot down, right? So we're trying to challenge them and make it kind of, you want to gamify it as much as possible, but then you put them in the
yeah,
positions that you want and then add to some kind of sport movement with it or something like that. And that's kind of how I'm doing it currently is getting as much game as I can. And then like, if I get them tired enough, they'll lay down in positions, right? So it's like lay down here and hang out for a second, so they can breathe and I'll block
yeah,
them and
yeah,
make it hard for them to breathe. And then if I can find, if they're into sports and I can find, I can find an athlete that's good, that does certain things like Steph Curry does some diaphragmatic work in NBA. Some golfers do some PRI stuff. And if I could find like examples of, hey, this guy does this, they, it's like,
yeah,
hey, look, he's doing this too. It's like, so you can see, and it's like, okay, so they're more likely to do it, right? And so like, I'm just trying to find everything I can from a motivation standpoint to get them motivated to do something different than what they're used to doing. When it comes to like them playing, they're just gonna go do what they do. Like it's either all or none for the most part. Like it's hard to enforce
Yeah.
restrictions on kids, and I say that's hard to enforce restrictions on competitive athletes. Like you hey, hold back. I'm like, I know you're not gonna hold back. Like I talk to like some of the high school kids I work with, and say, I'm like, look, I don't want you to go 100%. Like that's not gonna happen, right? So it's like you got 10 minutes, and because like I know they're gonna go like as much as I can, like because they're not gonna as soon as someone beats them one time, like they're like I can't do that again, right? So like they're not gonna wanna they're gonna go 100%, and so it's like I start imposing more time limits versus like percentages or things like that, and that usually how it works, but gamify it as much as possible. Get the things they like to do involved with it is very useful. And so like footballs, basketballs, tennis rackets, whatever it is, I try to get those involved with all types of rehab, right? And that's generally the thought process behind it.
That's awesome, man. It's like you that would be such a positive experience for the athlete because you're relating to the athlete. You're creating better buy-in, being more relatable in
Mm-hmm.
that sense, and showing examples of people who they may look up to will definitely create that buy-in to get them to do what you want them to do in
Right.
that sense.
Yeah.
All right. So just I want to talk a little bit about the wides versus narrows and just a general question. And I kind of know where this is going, but I don't know. This is kind of mixed at the moment now, but who has more movement options, wides or narrows?
Generally, narrows gonna have more movement options, movement capabilities in
Has it got
general.
more Is that
Right.
because they have more expansive strategies?
Yes. I say that with the idea is I look at the more basic you are. So like someone who's like in between would have the most movement options. That makes sense. Like someone who someone who's like not fully narrow, not fully wide, right? So like I say like you're gonna be what narrow, but like who's ISA or just like approximately middle, right? So someone in between, they're gonna have the most movement options, but they're also gonna be boring, if that makes sense. Like they're not gonna have the high force production capabilities. Gonna be
Yeah.
very down the middle. Um,
Yeah.
and then you got to take out the idea of the angle that I have. So like we're thinking about if I look at someone who's wide, so like think about a box or a straight up cylinder, however you want to look at it,
Yeah.
they're like, okay, we're biased heavily towards one side because of our archetype, and we're gonna stay like within that archetype. But as soon as I start changing that angle, it's like I have wider shoulders, narrow hips, or narrow shoulders and wide hips. I start losing strategies right away. I start losing movement right away because now it's like I'm biasing one end of the spectrum at that point.
Mm.
And so it's like, okay, now I'm biased towards this end of the spectrum. So now I lose movement options because I'm biased, but I'm heavy, strong in these positions. So like those are people who are the most athletic, but like they may not have as much range of motion, true range of motion. Not saying they can't be athletic because they're force producers, right? Because they're just always fighting gravity. Like they're so fast off the ground, like they may not be able to sink as deep in a squat. They may struggle with hitting a deep squat, but they're really strong, right? Whereas the
Mm.
other way around, it's like you have someone else who's the narrow shoulders, narrow rib cage, and wide hips. Is like they're so heavy into the ground, they struggle coming off the ground, and so it's like they have to produce so much force just to move. They just start losing movement capabilities from the idea of I have to produce force, and so it's not in between. But generally, narrow is going to have a more expansive strategy and have more range of motion options, be it through relative motion or even just through orientation abilities, right? Their ability to kind of yield and achieve shapes, even if it's through orientation, and that's generally because of the archetype itself biases more of a yielding, more of an expansive strategies throughout the system, not just the
Hmm.
joints, right? The connective tissues tend to be a little bit better at yielding, and so that helps with movement overall.
So, would you say like someone with a wider pelvis, and let's say like they're kind of just straight. They're not really
Mm-hmm.
athletic. They're not V'd up. Do you feel like if they were to do like just say a counter movement jump, would they spend a longer time on the ground producing force
Compared to who?
than someone
Yeah.
than a narrow? Obviously, with a narrow
Yeah.
pelvis, like it's
But I don't know. I wouldn't
mm,
necessarily go there and say that because if we're looking at a narrow, they may have to squat down deeper. They may need to spend more time to produce the force needed to jump, right? Where if I'm wider, I'm gonna produce force rather quickly. The height may be different, right? But because I have this wide pelvis, my diaphragm is just bigger, right? And I can produce I can produce force faster. So I may have a faster ground contact time in general. Now you got to look at the peak force where it occurs. Like that's gonna
Yes.
like you got to take all that into consideration, right?
Yeah,
And
I
so it's
know.
like it's not like a straight up answer. How much do they weigh? What's their training age?
Yeah.
Things like that. But like if we look at it, like say everything was pound for pound the same, um, taking height considerations, odds are if I'm doing a counter movement jump, I'm going to spend less time on the ground with the wide because I'm producing force faster. I'm going to get off the ground faster, but the height may not be the same. Like I'm not saying I'm jumping as high, but because I have to produce more force potentially, it takes me longer to produce the force needed to jump. I have to have a longer ground contact time to increase the force developed to push through the floor to get high. Where again, and the narrow just it takes them a little bit longer to produce that force.
So in terms of reactive, let's say reactive ability, right? If someone has a narrower pelvis and a V'd up, let's say we got the V'd up, and then we
Mm-hmm.
got someone who's just like a block, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're wide. Would the V'd up guy have more of a would be able to easily get off the ground or be able to recouple energy a lot more efficiently than someone with a wider pelvis? Would you say?
Yeah, and I would say even if you're just a narrow and you're doing like reactive stuff, like bouncy stuff, I'm gonna say a narrow is probably gonna get off the ground faster than a wide because they have such a short IR time, right? So the overall goal would be they're gonna stay in the ER position and yield better, right? So
Yeah.
your narrow is gonna be able to yield in and out, use connective tissues, which is gonna be faster than having to push constantly, or the stiffness is gonna like anchor them in the bottom potentially out of the way up. Like,
Yeah.
and I say that like again, the more V'd you are, the more you're gonna be able to come off the ground faster. But like a narrow V versus a wide V, I'm still thinking the narrow is gonna come off the ground quicker because of the bounciness. But if you're V'd up, again, imagine like you have a lot of space to push things up into from this narrow pelvis. So it's like this pressure builds so high, so fast at the bottom, just keeps shooting it up. And so you can constantly get your guts, get the weight, your center of mass, everything up off the ground quickly because you're constantly like you just had it's just constant pressure, but you also have a ton of space and a lot of power relatively pushing back down. Where you do the opposite the other way around if you have the narrow the narrow rib cage and like not the opposite of a V, right? They're going to be anchored; they can't get anything up. But like the idea is like narrows generally going to be more vertically oriented, right? They can bounce a little bit better up and down. Where wide's going to be forward oriented, and that's because of the
Better.
orientation of the pelvis, the counter nutation versus nutation.
So they'd be better accelerators,
Better
like the
accelerators,
wides.
but not as great as top speed, right?
Yeah. 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 Well, you kind of like if you look at like I think we spoke about this before. Usain Bolt, like he only really started like hitting top speed at what like 60 or 70 meters or
I
something.
swear he accelerated the entire race. I don't even know, man. That dude, so he was always like, it just goes and it's like
Yeah.
just gets faster compared to everybody else the whole way through. Like, yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, his acceleration wasn't elite. I mean, it was elite
Yeah.
to the like if you're talking about top 10 in the world, he wasn't he wasn't that dude for acceleration, but his top speed was out of this world. It just took him
Yeah.
longer. Like I said, it's the same idea of like the jump, right? It took longer to produce the force to get that speed, but
Mm.
as he has that time to get that speed, he's going to win. Like he wasn't a 60-meter runner, right? That's not that wasn't his game. He was 100,
Hmm.
200.
Definitely. Yeah, that's what I mean. Like 200, I just think like he dominated 200, right? But I think he didn't really hit that full potential of 200. I reckon there was more in there for him. But another question, just one more question before we wrap things up. This is probably a question for Matt, but I think you're going to do this one justice as well. What are your thoughts on plyometrics? People just jumping off their toes off the forefoot.
No, it's not. It's not ideal. Um, it's again, if you look at it even from a gait propulsive cycle, right? You're looking at late. Late is pushing off the ground. There's no storage in late. Like what I mean, you're in a late. You're done. You're shown the storage. So if I'm on my toes all the time, I'm not getting nearly the storage I need. I'm not getting the pushing the elastic recoil. I'm not getting what I need. At the same time, if I train it, like I'm gonna be off the ground too fast, my ground contact time is gonna be too high, too short. I'm gonna have to increase it. Two, if I don't change the mechanics and I keep training, eventually I'm going to teach the gastroc or the Achilles to yield more. So it's going to lead to more damage, more stretch, more essentially higher potential of tendinitis, or I'm just going to pull through the bone, one or the other, and it's going to lead to again the same idea. And so the general thought process is like you want more of a whole foot, forefoot, like midfoot pressure on the landing. And Matt hit on that for sure. He was like, you don't want to be on your toes. Like it's just you want the appropriate ground contact time. You want to be able to anchor where you're not. And I always talk to the athletes, like, I think about it, it's like, even if I'm jumping, like, I'm slapping the ground and attacking the ground and striking the ground, if I strike on my toes, I got nowhere to go, right? I'm up. I'm not going anywhere else. Like, if I hit the whole foot, it's like, I can go up a little bit still. I can get a little bit of push out of it, right? And it's like, or I have to go down, then back up if I hit on the toes, right? So there's no doubt, like, you got to hit a whole foot. Matt teaches whole foot contact, but it essentially is a midfoot contact. But the whole foot just helps people get it. Like you'll have the kids who overdo it, like land on their heels. Like no, don't land on your heels, bro.
No.
Like if you're trying to go up and down, don't land on your heels. If you're doing like a deep tier, if you're doing like a broad jump, somewhere where you have a acceleration of more time, like your goal is to increase the time that you're moving. So you're going heel toe to increase the yield, increase the full cycle, slow things down a little bit, increase more muscular action. Yeah, then you're going heel. But for the most part, again, you never really want to go toes because you're late. That's not even that's an expression of force, not necessarily the stress shortening cycle. You lose your whole yield. Yeah.
Exactly. And I just think you're going to do a lot more like wear and tear to the Achilles in that
without
sense.
a doubt.
And it's like people will argue and say, well, most sports, if you want to be athletic, and this was something that's going around in the combat sport community where they're like, you got to be on your toes in order to generate force and be able to move. And it's like, well, it depends in what context you're talking about. Like if you're talking about a wrestling position and you're looking at someone who's looking like we spoke about this, they will compensate and they'll miss certain phases of gait in order to achieve the position in order to generate force. Now, it's not ideal and it's not something we should replicate in the weight room and try and train because using the weight room to try and replicate the demands of a sport is a silly idea. It's more of just trying to fill in the gaps. But I think what Matt is saying with the full foot contacts, it's to correct people. It's like when someone's boxing and they'll say, put more weight on your back leg, sit on your back leg more. It's to center the athlete back because they may be falling over their front leg. Like this is for someone who's a beginner. And I just think it's an overcorrection to get people to land more on the forefoot.
Right.
And it's like swiping a credit card underneath the heel. Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah, I would agree with you because like the thought process is like most likely, don't be on your heels. Right. So like get on your toes, like, well, not necessarily, but just like don't be on your heels the whole time. Right. If you're standing and you're just, the issue is it's too slow now. Now you got to generate the whole cycle. Right. You want to be kind of somewhere in between, but it's not on your toes, as you say. It's more of, like you said, like a lot of times overcorrects like chest up, straight back, things like that. It's like, some in between. Yeah. But like if
somewhere in between, yeah.
And depending on the athlete, depending on what the cue is, some people resonate, some people won't. But understanding like it's not about, like you're saying, like just being 100% on your toes.
Well, their argument is exactly like, well, if you look at sprinting close on, this was his argument. You'll see that the heel doesn't touch the ground. I'm like, that's bullshit. Like you will see, it's almost like swiping a credit card underneath the heel, but you will see the foot transition into pronation in order to push off the floor. And if you're only training late stance, you're probably never going to get that pronation through the foot because you're not going to get into that midfoot if you're just bouncing off your toes.
Right. And even if you're sprinting, you're moving forward the whole time.
Yes.
Yeah, you're not standing still.
Exactly.
Or you're literally moving forward as fast as you can. So it's like, even if like you're pronating still, but like even your heels aren't down, there is still dorsiflexion involved, especially like acceleration. Like you're not hitting in a forefoot. And if you're standing and you have to have weight, you're gonna be on, you're gonna be plantar flex. It's like just because the weight's on the balls of your feet, like you have to position everything else to make sense from there. And it's like, and the key is to be ready to come out of it, but you can't have your weight forward.
Yeah, definitely. Greg, thank you for jumping on, man. Sorry about the first time. We had some tech issues. I got a new podcast guy, so this will be hopefully uploaded next week. Before we wrap things up, where can people find you? What do you have going on at the moment? And where can people pay you?
Yeah, yeah. I'm on Thorn Training and Therapy on Instagram. That's primarily our my main education site or page, and on the gram. I also have One Step Away Athletics, OSA Athletics, on Instagram, and we'll probably be posting a lot more there now with some basketball stuff. I'm working with a kid. We're start putting together some programs that people can utilize, and then from an education standpoint, full blown training, AMP education. Dr. Sean Astorga. It's his page. I work with him in regards to mentoring. I think it's a really good education platform for that and to pay. So if you want to get started with that, I would say Bill Hartman now has also. It's not me, but I gotta give him a shout out. He has his online unified health and performance model going on. It's free, so I would definitely check that out. It's solid. It gives you a good understanding of a lot of the stuff that people are teaching, and it's from the source, and you can ask questions in there. So I do think it's a useful because it's free. Like just get in there and listen to him.
I signed up to it.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome, man. Well, look, I'm going to put I'll put your Instagram tag in the show notes, and anything else like that you want me to put up, I'll pop it up there for you.
Awesome.
But thank you, Greg. Thanks for jumping on,
Thanks
bro.
for having me again. Thanks for having me. Always good to chat.
Yeah. All right, man. See ya.
All right. See ya.